and this series is a coordinated effort. It's an initiative coordinated by the BC ACC, BC Association of Counselors, and the other school that offers this fabulous venue and a few helping students. And so we really appreciate such a great turnout tonight. I mean, I'm kind of in mixed minds about such a great turnout, given the topic and the challenge that are facing our teens and parenting, etc. But I'm thrilled that so many people are here to help, right? So that's great. And we do videotape the presentation because many people who come maybe hear something and think, gee, somebody else I know might want to hear this or could benefit from this. So these videos will be posted through the BC ACC, and then there'll be a link onto YouTube where you can watch them, or if someone you know who lives in a faraway place would benefit from it, then you can pass on the pay it forward, so to speak. Now I know Deborah has sent out a sheet. Because there's so many of you, she obviously didn't really need to photocopy all the information. So she sent out a sheet asking if you'd like to get information or handouts, that if you wrote down your email and your name, then she will send them. So wherever that sheet ended up, if it could carry on around the rooms tonight and end up back here at the end, that'd be perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to say that Talking Taboos, Teens and Internet Pornography was supposed to be presented by both Sean and Deborah, but I made an error and sent them the wrong date. So we have Deborah in the flesh. And she's going to do, two tasks extremely well. So Deborah comes with a great range of experience. She's a registered psychologist and clinical supervisor. She has many years of expertise in supporting parents, children, adolescents, and families with situations of adoption, trauma, and extreme behavior. So a dynamic and challenging group. She's the founder of Sand Story Psychology Services in Kitsilano, and she supervises clinicians of all levels and provides many workshops for both parents, teachers, professionals, etc. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Deborah Bell. Thank you.
Hi, thanks all for coming tonight. The good news is that, it wasn't both Sean and I out of town tonight, and so that I'm able to be here. The bad news is that Sean's the funny one, so I apologize for that in advance. I'll probably trip or something goofy like that, just so you know, so it'll keep things interesting. But actually, not having Sean here presents a bit of a dilemma for me with this particular topic. And that is that I think that it's really important when we're talking about pornography to have both a female and male voice. And so I really invite all of you to be active participants and bring all of your voices forward with this. Because I think that it's very easy as women, we can say, oh, he's saying that because he's a guy. Or I'm saying that because I'm a girl. And that's really not what this subject is about. Tonight we are not talking about the pros and cons of pornography. We're not talking about whether or not pornography is morally right or wrong. We're talking about how do we work with our kids and keep them safe from things that they need to be kept safe from. And that doesn't necessarily mean all pornography. And so we're going to talk about that as we go. Okay? So keep that in mind, that I'm really trying to have both a male and female voice up here tonight on my own. One of the things about pornography is everybody tends to have very strong feelings about it. And we all have our own definitions about what is porn and what isn't. And so keeping in mind that as well. How many people are here tonight in a capacity of a parent? And how many are here as professionals working with you? Oh, wow. So lots of crossover. Excellent. And so it's really important to be aware of how we personally feel about porn and how we communicate that to our children, whether it's the children that we're working with or our own children. So I worked with a mom once who came to me and she was absolutely devastated because her 18-year-old daughter was downloading porn off the internet. And when I got more information from Mom, it turned out that what she was downloading was sort of romantic novels with lots of sex in them, right? And this particular 18-year-old had quite a bit of delay. And dating is probably going to be a real challenge for her, but her body is developing normally. And it was probably just sort of a way for her to try and figure out her own sexuality. So being able to bridge that between Mom and this young woman was pretty huge, right? Because Mom had very strong feelings about that. And she was really worried for her daughter, worried about her daughter being deviant or that there was something wrong with her. Okay. So remember, once again, we're not taking a moral stance on this. That's not what this is about tonight. So pornography or porn can have many different definitions. What's considered porn to some might not be pornographic to another. So what we're going to be discussing tonight is this definition put out by McManus. And basically it's any sexually explicit material that is designed primarily to arouse the audience sexually. Okay, that's our working definition for tonight. So, and this is really about understanding what are our teenagers doing in this day and age of technology. Not do we agree with it, but understanding what are they doing. And then taking that information and making informed decisions for your children. So internet porn, or IP, may depict heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, multiple sexual partner scenarios. Basically, if you can possibly imagine it, it's on the internet. And if you can't imagine it, it is on the internet. And that is really important to understand. A lot of IP depicts women in a way that is demeaning, or promotes misogyny, or is violent. It tends to represent sexual encounters that are risky, violent, and devoid of personal connection. So, what's a personal connection? You guys are going to be all quiet. Is that because the camera's on? Or because we're talking about porn?
Intimacy. Some form of intimacy.
Some form of intimacy. Yeah. What about for our youth today?
Form of a relationship.
A relationship.
Knowledge of the other person.
Knowledge of the other person. So lots of ideas about what connection is. And for our youth today, how are they connecting to each other?
Technology, yeah.
Technology, yeah. Facebook, texting, Twitter, all of those social media things, right? So it kind of has a bit of a different definition of connection than some of the definitions that you just shared tonight. And that's an important distinction because we need to think about that when we're thinking about youth, because they're seeing that as an actual connection. This was a first for me. Back in the fall, a 16-year-old girl came into my office, and she had spent the previous hour developing a text message to break up with her boyfriend in Toronto, who she'd never met. And she brought in her phone into the session, and she said, "Okay, you press send." God, I'm pressing send. So we had to work through that. She pressed send, and then sobbed for the rest of the session. Absolutely heartbroken for this boy that she'd never met. Okay. So there are these categories categories of pornography out there that are called ethical and feminist porn. And these are pornography sites that are dedicated to pornography that show regular people having regular sex and often in loving relationships. And I'm putting it out there because I don't want anybody to come away thinking that I have some bias and I'm saying that all pornography is violent and negative. That's not true. There's lots of other stuff on the internet too. If you find a way to sit down with your teenager and say, you can watch this site but not this one, please let me know. Your screeners or your parental controls on your computer are not going to make those distinctions for you, just so you know. And really, the internet has actually led to more people looking at pornography than ever before. So this actually is a new trend. Yes, pornography has always been there. The amount of people accessing it is different now that it's on the internet, because you no longer have to, go incognito to the local XXX shop and hope that you don't run into anybody that you know, right? There's a sense of privacy and anonymity that comes with the internet. And so people are curious. But also, significant numbers of children and adolescents are being exposed to internet porn before they're developmentally ready. And this is really important to understand because it might be happening deliberately. They might be out there curious and looking for it. I have an 8-year-old client who mom and dad were very good about tracking her use, but she typed in the word sex into Google. Can you imagine what comes up for an 8-year-old girl? Lots of stuff. My 6-year-old son, whenever he hears sexy on the radio in a song lyric, he says, "Oh, Mom, they swore." And I don't know where he got that, because I'm not sure that's really, I've been trying to correct him. It's like, well, no, they're not swearing. Sexy is a word that you use if you're grown up. Because I don't really want him to think that sex is a swear word either. But yeah, he sort of picked up that. But it can also happen accidentally, right? Which you know. So, and I can give you an example of that. When my son was, he was a real Thomas the Tank Engine fan when he was a little guy. There couldn't be anything more innocent than that. And he likes to watch stuff on YouTube. And you can actually, on YouTube, find videos of Thomas the Tank Engine having sex with another train. So you just never know what your child is going to come across, even entering something as innocuous as Thomas the Tank Engine. So the big question from parents is, right, especially for teenage boys, well, isn't this a natural thing? This is what boys do. This is boys being boys. What's the problem? And it is absolutely normal for both boys and girls to be curious sexually. Their bodies are developing. They're getting all sorts of sexual feelings. They're getting attracted to the opposite sex. They're absolutely going to be curious. They're absolutely going to look. And it is completely normal. And it might not just be the internet, right? They might be looking at pornography through all different kinds of medias. And this has been happening, as many dads point out, from the beginning of time. It's normal. The thing is that, this is different. The internet porn is different than the old Playboy under the mattress. And we're going to talk more about why. or, yeah, do you remember back in the days when it was the Sears catalog? But you know, the other thing is that kids will access all different kinds of porn. They're just curious. They're not screening things out based on what it is. If it pops up, they're probably going to look at it. And so you might find that kids are looking at gay porn, straight porn, all sorts of different kinds of porn. It doesn't mean if you have a child that's looking at gay porn that they're gay. It just means that they're curious and they're looking at all sorts of different things. And that's a real fear for some parents, and so it's important to understand that too. You're just curious about sex. So one of the main problems that comes with internet porn is, of course, the accessibility. Young people can access these sites anytime and anywhere, and access to these images can have unexpected repercussions and serious side effects. 95% of Canadian youth reported using the internet regularly. The average American teen owns 3.5 mobile devices. There appears to be an increasing trend of compulsive use of pornography and cybersex in general. So this means there's more access to unmonitored internet use than ever before. Think about that, 3.5 devices per child. And when I first wrote this slide, I was thinking, because I was doing the research for it, oh no, 3.5 per kid? And then I started thinking about my kids, right? My daughter, she's 10. She has an iPod. Now she has an iPad mini. We have a computer in the home. There's 3. And she's 10. So you can see that very quickly this adds up, and the accessibility is huge. So that means that as parents and people working with youth, we really have to be able to understand internet porn, understand what our kids are being exposed to, and understand what's okay for them and what might not be okay for them. The other thing I often find working with parents in my practice is that there's really a false sense of safety around this. I can't tell you how many teenagers have access to the internet in their bedrooms. It is so difficult. Those of you who have teenage children know that they're probably better at breaking through parental controls and your passwords than you are at putting them on. And so when they have private access in their bedrooms, it's very, very difficult to monitor. So if we're going to talk about internet porn and say we need to be plugged into this and understanding what's going on, we have to understand a little bit about adolescent development, about why this is even a topic. Because this is actually a real critical stage of development. Lots of people think of adolescents as these little adults that, you know, now it's time for hands off. My job as a parent is done. We just need to let this little person go and be independent. And actually, it's not true. Adolescence is a time where they really need us as parents. They need us to be connected to them, and they need our guidance. The hands-off approach, and it doesn't matter what you're looking at, whether you're looking at anxiety, teen pregnancy, depression, suicide, behavioral problems, delinquency. The one thing that comes out across all of that research is that if those adolescents are connected to their parents, not controlled by their parents, connected to their parents, that they are much less likely to struggle with any of those issues. So this is huge, because the brain during adolescence is actually rapidly developing. It's streamlining its connections, it's honing all of those important reflexes and abilities to think and make good decisions. So there's physical development, emotional development, cognitive development, social development, spiritual development, sexual development. They are the most vulnerable viewers of internet porn because their brains are at such a sensitive stage of development. So, conflict in sexual beliefs of the family and those offered through the internet can lead to increased sexual uncertainty, right? So, if you're raised in a home that teaches you that sex is something that happens between two people who love each other, who are connected to each other, and then your child goes off and they're watching all this porn where you just have sex with the male guy on the photocopier after the office is closed, or I don't know, I can't even think of any other scenarios off the top of my head. You know, those classic porno casual encounters, right? And your brain is just developing and trying to understand sex and sexual relationships. That's confusing. They're naturally going to think, are mom and dad lying? Look, I can see this all over the internet. This is what sex looks like. And so, and especially because it's not that comfortable talking to our kids about sex, so if we're not talking about it that much, then the child's kind of left to interpret that on their own. And the bad news is that they're not likely to make the interpretation that you want them to make. It's very powerful. So the other thing that has been found through the research is the more internet porn viewed, the more it's related to increased views of sex as something that is physical and casual, increased preoccupation with sexual thoughts and cognitions. So they think about sex even more than they normally would with their adolescent brain, and increased sexual permissiveness. I had a mom in my office last week. Her son just started high school, grade 8, and he doesn't want to go to parties. He doesn't want to go to parties because when he goes to parties, the girls are giving the guys blowjobs. And this is just a standard thing. These are 13-year-old children. I had another client. She goes to high school, grade 10, brand new school. She meets a very nice boy in gym class who's nice to her, and they're having fun in gym class. So he says, hey, after school, are we going to go behind the gym so you can give me a blowjob? Just like that. That's what our kids are doing. Because sex is a casual encounter. I know all of you are sitting there thinking, that's okay. But really, this is what adolescents are exposed to all of the time. And when you see that enough, it starts to become real. I feel bad for the camera person because I move around a lot. You can see you trying to track me. So, the other thing, this has been found through research, the more internet porn viewed, the more it is related to increased views of girls as sex objects, and for youth to have more negative body images. Now, this was found on both adolescent boys and girls. It's not something exclusive to girls. So girls start to see themselves as there to fulfill a boy's needs, and girls become depersonalized, making pornography seem more acceptable. The more an adolescent sees girls as sex objects, the more likely they are to view internet porn. So isn't that interesting? If you view internet porn as a girl, you're more likely to see yourself as a sex object, which makes you more likely to go out and view more porn. So it becomes cyclical. So what these findings indicate is that more and more we are losing our ability to instill our own values in our children as they are being more greatly influenced by media than ever before. Adolescents who view more internet porn are also more likely to engage in casual sexual encounters and have intercourse at an earlier age. Adolescent brains may be developmentally more likely to become addicted to internet porn than adult brains. And this can be difficult to treat and have significant physiological effects on the young person. So here's something that many parents don't understand, that there's something called internet porn-induced erectile dysfunction. We have more young men in their late teens and early 20s not able to maintain an erection with a real, live, beautiful young girl in their presence than ever before. So IP-induced erectile dysfunction is when a male is unable to maintain an erection to have intercourse in the context of a real relationship without the use of porn. It is psychologically and emotionally devastating side effect of young people watching internet porn. And so I got a little clip for you. Is this going to work for you? All right, hang on. Yeah, I'm on this Shaw hotspot. I wonder.
Try to get on Heather.
It might work better. Can you guys hear that?
Yes.
Dopamine spikes. You're supposed to have them. So you get excited, bungee cord jumping, chocolate, or having sex. Lots of stimulation in there. But if you have too much of it, which pornography allows, you cloud the whole process. And by doing that, you actually deaden these reactions so they don't fire quite as much. So the things that used to get you excited don't get you excited anymore, like the usual sex that you're supposed to have with the person that you love. And this is an unfortunate reality, is these nerves sort of short-circuit and stop serving. But that nerve is overwhelmed by watching pornography. Now, what's normally happening when those nerves are fired is this. It gives rise to a very unique process. The male erection. And it seems like it's a well-orchestrated machine because it is, but it's not magic. You know, it's got to function in a very predictable way. And if you don't have all the little parts of the machinery working together, it's very, very unfortunate because it's like pulling the plug, even if one small thing is not working, like the dopamine in your brain. And that, my friends, is a real downer. And when it comes crashing down, it changes your life. In fact, in your relationships, it causes you all kinds of issues, many of them around the shame of not being able to have something that's normally functioning perfectly, function perfectly. So Dr. Curran, you argue this is not the only reason that we have erectile dysfunction. There's another cause of pornography-induced erectile dysfunction.
Absolutely. When a guy over-masturbates, he can develop what is called an idiosyncratic masturbatory style. Okay, it's a clinical term. It means that he is really touching himself with a kind of friction and a kind of pressure that is not similar to the kind of friction and pressure that he would have during intercourse. So he is literally acclimating himself to a new kind of physical pressure and sensation that really kind of desensitizes him during actual sex.
This is one of the most shocking things I found reading about this. Doctors discovering this about porn-induced erectile dysfunction, is that it cannot be treated with traditional drugs. So Viagra, Cialis, Levitra, the usual drugs that are effective for this aren't impactful. Dr. Kramer, why is that?
Makes perfect sense. Pills will do something physiologic. They can provide blood flow to the genitalia, but what they can't do is stimulate the most important sexual organ, which is the brain. So when the brain is desensitized, you create a mismatch. And some men will even say, well, I do get an erection. Even in these men who are able to be treated, even with that erection, they do feel desensitized. They don't get pleasure. So it doesn't treat the pleasure component. and they feel that maybe I'm watching someone else, having sex, but it's not even my penis. I feel like dissociated from the experience. And when they have that, they have this brain-penis mismatch created where the brain is simply not feeling pleasure, even if they may or may not achieve an erection.
The brain-penis mismatch.
Yes, I think that's what we're seeing in people who watch porn, where these medications will work, and certain things work in anyone, certain pills or injections.
No, I get it. I think we're quoting a new phrase, brain-penis mismatch. It actually is, I think, a very reasonable way to think about what we're describing here. So it's not just the men, of course, that are affected by porn-induced erectile dysfunction, but their wives as well. Dr. Barman, since you see these folks in your practice a lot, why aren't couples talking about this? I mean, obviously, the woman's aware this is a problem.
Right. Well, there's an enormous amount of shame and guilt associated with it. The woman thinks that this is my fault, that I'm not attractive enough. What's wrong with me? Why can't I arouse desire in a partner? And the man feels really guilty because he says, why am I not aroused? And he's confused because he says, I feel aroused by her, I'm attracted to her, and I want to please her. And I think that's why this is such a difficult conversation to have, because we think that everything should just work normally. And I think the problem when we're watching porn is because we are setting some bar that doesn't exist, something really unrealistic. It's not even a higher bar, it's just an unrealistic bar. And people are very afraid to talk about it because for men, their masculinity is tied into their performance, because an erection is really an all or nothing thing, the way that people look at it. But I don't think that sex is an all or nothing thing, and it should not be seen as black and white, that either you're able to have an erection and have intercourse where there is no sex. There are many ways to express and connect to your partner in a sensual way that doesn't have to be a black and white issue.
Any questions or comments about that?
What was the date of that TV?
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah, sorry. That question I can't answer. Anybody else? Anything surprising in there?
What was the name of that? Idiosyncratic? Did you catch that name?
Idiosyncratic masturbatory something. Yeah. Masturbatory style or something? Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, how prevalent is that? I mean, because I'm sure it's very prevalent that our teenagers are watching a lot of porn. How often does it get to that stage for them physically?
Well, I don't have any actual stats about that. What I know is that the numbers are getting higher all the time, whereas before it was pretty rare to see a young man with erectile dysfunction. Now it's becoming more and more common. And you heard Dr. Oz say about how the traditional medicines don't actually work with this problem, but they actually even had to sort of revamp Viagra because young men wouldn't take it. They said, well, that's for old guys, right? And saw themselves as different. So, yeah.
Do you know of any celebrity men who are speaking about this? Because it seems like they're all talking like it's just revolutionary new information, and they're not communicating in any way in that video that teens are talking about this, that there's language or jargon that they're using. Do you know of any celebrities that are...
I have not heard any celebrities talk about this topic. Has anybody else heard of a celebrity talking about this? Dr. Oz is probably as celebrity as he gets, but he's not too appealing to the younger crowd, right? Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is a movie that came out about a year ago called Shame, and it had Michael Fassbender in it, and it was about the impact of pornography on his life, and about how his inability to connect, basically. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things before we go into the part that I know that you've been waiting for, I just want to go back to some of the effects. Because one of the things that I want to point out is this point about how both boys and girls have more negative body image when they watch internet porn. Because I think it's important to talk about, well, what does that mean? So I don't know how many people in this room watch porn or have watched porn or know what that looks like. But what do most of the women in porn look like?
Plastic.
Barbie, plastic, really large breasts, right? That are usually implants, very thin.
No agency.
No agency?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
They're hyper objectified, so they can't. They don't seem like they're in control of the situation.
Yes. So that's more circumstantial, but yeah, absolutely. What about the men?
Total control.
Total control. What about their bodies?
Like the masculine, like muscular. And
Yes. And the average size of the male penis is about 5 inches, and the average size of a male penis in a porno is 8 inches. So you got a 13-year-old little boy who's just developing, and he's looking at himself, and he's looking at this stuff on the computer and feeling like, that's not what I look like. Right? So it's not just girls. It's not just girls that are not measuring up. That can have a huge impact. And this is all stuff that's been found through research, and I think that's important. I did a lot of reading when I developed this presentation, and it's interesting because there definitely are articles out there, and you know, it's important for you guys to hear both the pros and cons, but there's definitely those out there who say, you know what, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It doesn't cause any kind of harm, and it's all right, and boys will be boys, and teens will be curious. So absolutely, you can find that argument out there as well.
Sorry, is that is that from like researched stuff, or is that just? I mean, obviously, with people saying that, but is there a lot of research that? My understanding is that some of the research is kind of conflicting. Some says that it has these negative effects, and others says that it doesn't have that, has negative effects.
So, yeah, good question. Some of it comes from research. Some of them don't find a strong effect. Lots of them are finding a very strong effect. Some of it depends on where it happens. So the countries where the research happens, where it doesn't have as strong of an effect, tend to be the European countries. And I don't know if you guys know about the research of the difference in sexual attitudes depending on ethnicity or country of origin. But Europe is much more liberal-minded than we are, and a lot more sexually open. So it makes sense to me that you know, studies that are done in Europe are not going to have the same kind of impact as a study here. But the thing is, our kids are raised here with this kind of you know, sexual understanding. So that means their cognitive dissonance, or you know, how confusing it is going to be greater, and even more significant in the U.S. Because the U.S. is much more conservative than we are. So it's culturally relevant.
So the more culturally conservative, the more conservative culture is, the more impacted.
Yes.
What you're saying.
And perhaps a part of that is the parents' role, right? Like if you know, people are more liberal in Europe, they're probably having more conversations about sex with their teens. So that mitigates a lot of the impact of the internet stuff as opposed
and
to
it's
here.
closer family culture than it is here, right? You're still often, you know, have extended family circumstances and all sorts of things that build resiliency, and excellent point. But you can definitely see sort of that difference in the research depending where it happens. And what I noticed is that a lot of the sort of opinion papers saying, you know, this isn't a big deal, that they used one reference and it usually was a study from Europe. But I think that if you really sort of do a good solid lit review, you'll see the trend, that this is sort of this reference that I gave you here, the 2012 one, this is a summary paper sort of reviewing all the most recent research on it. Yeah. Yeah.
However, the research on erectile dysfunction has nothing to do with culture, I would think.
No.
Right?
Yes.
It's physiological.
That's a physiological, and I mean, I think that it doesn't really matter what country you come from. If you are watching an excessive amount of internet porn and masturbating to it, it's going to cause that problem, right? That overfiring of the dopamine, and it's going to start that physiological reaction. And I think in the papers that I read that said, you know, it's not such a big deal, they weren't talking or looking at the physiological side of things at all. They were just looking more at the more body image or attitudes towards sex. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So how can parents protect their teens from too much internet porn? So parental controls is one. Now, every time I do this, I get the comment back, but Deborah, they can break through the parental controls. Absolutely, but keep at it, because even if they can break through the parental controls, what does it mean for them that you have them there?
That you care.
That you care. Yeah. That you're watching, that you're plugged in, that you take it seriously. You take them seriously. Yeah?
Yeah, I just was thinking about the parental controls that it is, I have two teenagers.
Yes.
My daughter is 14 and my son is 15. And about that, I always talk to them about it. I have those parental controls to help us. See, I talking to them like we are united in this. Right? It's not a parental control just because I don't want you to see this. Right? I think as parents we have to be working together with our teens and telling them, well, this is why the reason why I'm doing these parental controls. Right?
Yeah.
And so then they will be more into respecting those controls.
Yes.
Trying to break into them.
It becomes part of the family culture,
Yes.
right? This is for all of us.
Yes.
I've started with my kids now. There's parental controls on the iPads for both my 6-year-old and my 10-year-old. And I tell them it's because I love you too much to not have it there. Passwords, monitor regularly. That means that if your child has online account, you should have the password. There's no such thing as online accounts without giving the password. Now again, yes, you get lots of backlash, and for those of you who have teenagers who already have that level of control and you try and take that back, be ready for the fight. It'll happen, I know. I'm not naive about that. But, and they're setting up profiles under different names and all those things. But again, even if you can't control everything, it really makes a difference that you're taking the time to monitor and talking to your youth about what it is that they're doing online, even if you don't see it all. I worked with a 14-year-old who was completely addicted to her phone. She was on her phone all the time, Twitter, texting, and she had another one.
Instagram.
No?
Facebook?
Snapchat?
Right, you know them all. I can't think of it. It's one where there's lots of pictures of very sexy Instagram. It's not Instagram.
Snapchat.
It'll come to me.
Chai?
Tumblr. So, this little girl, 14 years old, she had this friend who was 25 And a self-professed, well, 25, this was a friend through Twitter, 25-year-old heroin addict. And there was big fights in the family home because she wanted to have her phone in the bedroom, but the parents had come to see me, and I said, no internet in the bedroom. And so they took her phone away, and then the meltdowns happened, right? Big screaming fits, throwing stuff, the whole 9 yards. And the dad said, I don't know if it's worth it. Just give her the phone, and it's so much easier. I said to him, Dad, which part of your 14-year-old talking to a 25-year-old heroin addict all night do you not have a problem with? But for him to be, this is an amazing dad. For him, the upset and the heartbreak he saw in his daughter, right? All that distress she was going through, and the fighting, and the upset in the home, it was hard for him to hang on to that piece. And so I think for all of you working in a professional capacity too, we have to remember that, right? To be gentle with these parents. Because even though, I was hard on him, but because I needed to pull him back in, but to understand that it's very, very difficult, particularly if the teen already has that access to try and undo that, right? It takes a lot of resolve and a lot of perseverance to be able to weather that storm. So you all need to consider whether or not your own use of internet porn is impacting your children. Because trust me, they know. If you're watching it, they know. I worked with a 15-year-old girl once who came in and she would give me regular reports about the online affair that her dad was having in her intact married home. Right? They know. Talk to your spouse about your own biases and expectations. If you're co-parenting, it's really important to be on the same page as each other, right? If one person is saying, boys will be boys, it's no big deal, and the other one is saying this is a big deal and we need parental controls, how's that going to go? Right? It causes lots of stress in the marriage or the relationship, and lots of stress for that young person because the message is confusing.
So what if you have like I'm working with a young one right now, the father and they're separated, so very different messages going on.
Do you get to work with both parents?
No.
No. If you are only working with one parent, you only have access to one parent. Having one parent plugged in and connected to the child is better than none. Absolutely. Yeah. So, there's circumstances where you just do what you can do, and sometimes you can't get the parents on the same page, right? That just doesn't happen. It's not possible. But what we know about attachment and connection is that really at the end of the day, that child just needs one real secure attachment and a soft place to fall and know that they're loved no matter what. That will make the difference for them. Yeah. And it's always interesting, right? Because in a situation of divorce, even if the child feels like, things are better at mom's because she doesn't have any rules, and I don't like being at dad's because he's got too many rules. Fast forward to 18, 19, even sometimes earlier, they get it. They do come around and appreciate those things. It might not happen right away because they have to sort of be able to process and grow cognitively to be able to sort of come to terms with that difference. And of course in adolescence, right, they want that freedom, even if they're not ready for it. But but they all appreciate it. Yeah. You know, there was an amazing PhD dissertation done at UBC, and this woman went into the downtown east side and interviewed street kids. So they were all adolescents, they were all living on the street, they were all drug involved, sex involved, and completely disconnected from their parents. And she interviewed them and got their stories. And do you know what was the same in every single child's story without exception? Was that they said, I wish that mom or dad had said no. The other thing that you want to do is be talking to your children about what it is that they are viewing. I do this even when my kids are watching the Disney Channel. Anytime kids are exposed to media, it's important to talk to them about, you know, what's going on? What's happening in this movie, or what's happening in this show? How do you make sense of that? And I don't know if you guys have watched the Disney Channel lately, but there's lots of interesting stuff on there, right? With sneaking out after dark, climbing out of windows to go to parties without parent permission, backstabbing, gossiping, all of this stuff. And, you know, I think lots of times as parents we think, well, it's Disney, it's okay. But how is your young person interpreting that stuff? So it's actually no different whether it's the Disney Channel or what they're seeing online with IP. The key is we want to have that communication open with our kids, because that's ultimately what's going to keep them safe. You can't raise them in a bubble. They're going to be exposed to stuff. But if you have the kind of relationship where you can sit down with your kid and say, hey, what was that all about? They're going to get through. You look like you have a question.
I'm just interested. So I run a sexual health education program for Vancouver Coastal Health, and we developed a new curriculum called Healthy Sexuality. And it's all under this bridge of media literacy, because while, yes, you know, don't watch too much, well, they are probably going to, and it's not just things that they are actively seeking out, but things they're stumbling upon, and be able to sort of engage them in a conversation around, okay, let's have an appreciation for the fact that there's media world and also real world, so they can be able to sort of critically examine, okay, I get that that's performance-based, and what's actually going to be, you know, taking place in my real life is going to be a bit different, and sort of, so I'm glad that you're touching on that, and I know that there are tools out there for parents or for anybody that are looking to engage people that they are in their home or that they work with in terms of, okay, well, how do I open up that conversation so they can think?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I saw in...
What was the name of that? The program or the curriculum?
It's called Condomania. It's Vancouver Coastal Health Sexual Health.
What age group is it for?
We work with 12 to 16.
Condomania?
Sorry, yes, Condomania. I'm hard after, woo! Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw in CTV News a couple of weeks back a facilitator of the iGuy workshops that does sort of media health workshops for young men. And he used the analogy with porn. I thought this was really great, so I'm going to steal it from him. So I'm going to share it with you so you guys can steal it from him too. Where he says that when he's working with young guys, he talks to them about how he makes the analogy that internet porn is like an action movie. That in an action movie, like all these like crazy physical things happen, right? Like the people are blowing stuff up and they walk through and they don't get hurt, even like fireballs, they can walk through it, they don't get hurt. It's very exciting, but it's not real. And internet porn is the same. That sex that they're seeing online is not real sex. Sex does not look like that. Bodies don't look like that, well, most. And the things that they're doing, and you want to know what some of the most dangerous internet porn is for these kids? The Japanese anime porn. Because let me tell you, if a real body can't do it, the cartoon bodies can. And they're doing stuff that's impossible. It didn't work. Didn't? My computer just about died this morning, I have to tell you. I got into my office this morning and I turned on my computer and it was like randomly shutting off like after about 30 seconds. So I had like this total panic because I didn't have this presentation on a memory stick and I was so scared I wasn't going to be able to keep my computer on long enough to get it on a memory stick, which I finally did. But anyways, so I'm like waiting for it to crash on me. So, number one rule, parents, don't freak out. Even if on the inside you're thinking, ah! You have to stay calm. Because if you freak out, what happens?
You close down the dialogue.
They close down, they'll stop talking. If you freak out, stop, right? You lost them. And you guys know that it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the pornography site that you saw in the history, or if you're talking to them about the fact that they didn't unload the dishwasher. If you freak out, they are not going to talk to you. Right? And really try and keep in mind in these moments is what motivated your child to look at those alarming sites is really healthy and normal sexual development. It's not that they're deviant. It's not that they're bad. It's not that they're deliberately breaking the rules. It's that they're curious and they're supposed to be at this age. That's exactly what their brains are trying to figure out. The major developmental milestone of adolescence is figuring out sexual relationships and how do I have intimacy and connectedness outside of my immediate family. Right? So, one little guy in our practice, he was only 12 years old. And he had been doing very well in therapy, and he was coming in for anxiety, and then suddenly his behavior plummeted. And Mom brought him back in and said, you know, I don't know what happened to little Billy. He's suddenly gotten much worse. And this was Sean's client, so I'm sorry he's not here to share the story. But, you know, Sean sat down with him, and slowly, slowly, the story came out that little Billy was watching all of this internet porn in secret. His parents had no idea. They thought he's 12 years old. What's he going to be watching, right? And he was so devastated on the inside. He was watching this stuff all the time, and at the same time feeling like there was something really wrong with him, that he was deviant or abnormal because he was watching this stuff. So, you know, amazing mom. Sean did an amazing job with her and brought her in and talked to her. And so they actually sat down all together, and the mom managed to have a celebration with Billy in Sean's office about how, hooray, you're finally masturbating, we're so proud. And, you know, which might sound funny, but this is a developmental milestone. And the more you can reduce the shame, the more likely kids are to talk to you, and the more likely you'll get the chance to debrief some of the stuff that they're exposed to. So talk to them about the images that they've seen. You can use this time to talk about your values and how what was seen in the IP differs from what you might believe in, and how you you know, were planning and hoping and working to raise your children. Withhold judgment. This is a surefire way to shut the communication down and lose your chance to reinforce those values. Reinforce the idea that this is not how real relationships work and how watching IP can be confusing. Teach your child that using IP for masturbating can interfere with their healthy development, and provide them with alternatives, right? Because really, the old Playboy under the mattress was a lot safer. Keep your discussions neutral and developmentally appropriate, and remember to listen. I think lots of times as parents we get really stuck in that teaching mode, and that's another time where we really can lose the adolescent if we try and overteach it. But if we're able to take a step back from that and really hear our children, it's amazing what will come out of them. But this isn't a friend-to-friend kind of talk. You don't want to be your child's friend. They don't need another friend. You want to be the parent or the counselor or the therapist. You want to be the attachment figure, the adult to the child. And that's very different. That's another way parents get lost in today's age, is that somehow we've come to believe in this generation of parenting that the goal is to be our children's friend. And if you're a friend, you don't have the power to parent. So that doesn't work, right? Remember those street kids? They wanted mom and dad to say no.
Do you think, like, in terms of sons, so I have a 17-year-old son, and his dad, you know, again, typical, he doesn't see the same concern. Do you think providing an alternative from a dad, for a dad to provide an alternative, would be received better? In the sense that, you know, it's not necessarily as the mom interfering, over-controlling. He might just be more receptive to that. If that whole
it's probably less embarrassing, right, to come from the dad.
And even the message about, you know, the erectile dysfunction, what the possibilities are.
I think the power of dads is huge. And the power of same-sex parents are huge, like male parent to male child, female parent to female child. Because really, you know, the majority of what your child is learning about how to be a man or a woman is coming from the same-sex parent, right? So, yeah. But not everybody has that, right? Not everybody has the dad in the picture that will play that role. And so I think if you don't have that, it's still important to have that communication with your opposite sex child. So these are some youth-friendly resources that I thought I would share. I want to leave time for questions. This is, so if you guys, I don't know if some of you came after.
Yeah, so people seem to have, and I myself once used to have, totally.
If you guys want copies of the handouts, to please sign up on the sign-up sheet that I've come around. You don't have to sign up for the newsletter. That's a newsletter that I put out that announces sort of upcoming events if you're interested in other trainings. You can just sign up for the slides only. That's no problem. I won't be offended. But these websites are in there, in the handout for you. So this is Lacey Green, and she just kind of goes and has these little rants that she does about sexual issues. So you can see she's young and happening, and she sort of has an interesting point of view. So I'm not going to play it so that we have time for more questions. this one is good. It's Porn World versus Real World, and it was created by an older woman who likes to have sex with younger men, which I'm assuming means of legal age. But what she says is that she noticed, she says usually in their 20s, was that she sees all this kind of stereotyped kind of making love from these young men, where clearly they're learning what they think the moves are from online porn. And so she created this website to sort of go through some of the sort of myths that men might have. And what does she do with it? So here's an example. So in the porn world, men love coming on women's faces, and women love having men come on their faces. Real world, some women like this, some women don't. Some guys like to do this, some guys don't. Entirely up to personal choice. About pubic hair. About orgasms. All women love anal sex. So she goes through and she sort of addresses some of the sort of big issues that come out from learning about sex online. And that's just not, where we want our young people getting their sex ed from. I don't think it's healthy for anyone.
Is this directed for youth, or is it for like...
I think she directed it actually for, hopefully, maybe her 20-somethings that she's interested in having sex with. Here, read this first. She has to sign a contract. Yeah, I don't know. I think she has a little blurb in there about if you're male or female, what you can get about from it. But anyways, yeah.
She has a TED Talk.
Does she have a TED Talk?
She does have a TED Talk. It's, I wouldn't say, because I screened it as something that a group wanted to show to teens, and I didn't think it was appropriate.
You didn't think it was appropriate?
Well, and in particular, too, I guess, because of her age, which she could be in her late 50s, early 60s, and she's talking about having sex with young men. I thought that kids would they'd be falling out of their chairs for one thing. And it was it was very graphic, and she talked about men love coming in women's faces, So she was talking.
So I think that if you're working with a young person, or you have a young person that's been watching a lot of porn, which might have some of these misconceptions, I think this is a good resource. It doesn't have any pictures, so you don't see the 60-something woman, on there. But yeah. Questions?
Do you know where the sheet is that we're signing up for?